Hello everyone, I'm Oliver. In our last video, we introduced Walter Scheidl's basic argument that as long as society develops peacefully, wealth inequality will inevitably worsen. This process can only be temporarily reversed by four factors: war, revolution, plague, and societal collapse. Other peaceful means, such as democratic voting, progressive tax system designs, and universal compulsory education, are ineffective, at best only slowing down the rate at which inequality increases. But why is this the case? I believe the answer lies in the division of labor. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine again, Bear One and I, we finally finished eating that hive of honey we had. Now, we each grab a stick to chase rabbits. Huffing and puffing, sweating all over, we can each catch about one rabbit per day on average. Then one day, I have a flash of inspiration and invent a net. I prop up this net with wooden sticks, and I Bear One hold a stick and guard behind the net. I run from a distance, banging a wash basin while running towards Bear One. When a rabbit runs into the net, Bear One whacks it to death with a stick. Because of the net, Bear One and I have formed a division of labor, and our daily harvest increases to 10 rabbits. So, will Bear One and I split them 50-50? Obviously not. The net is mine. You, Bear One, don't even need to run anymore. You just guard behind the net. Your labor intensity is greatly reduced. Therefore, I'm only willing to give Bear One 3 rabbits. Bear One will definitely agree too, because getting 2 extra rabbits a day is still a good deal, right? This is the simplest example of inequality caused by the division of labor. So, why does inequality gradually worsen? Because Bear One's daily calorie consumption is only 1/3 of what it used to be, but his food intake is 3 times higher. As a result, he becomes increasingly fat. When he becomes a big fatty and can't run anymore, then I'm going to have another talk with Bear One. All 10 rabbits are mine, and I'll give you 3 rabbit tails a day. If you don't agree, then you can go back to chasing rabbits with a stick yourself, just like before. And just like that, Bear One has gone from 1 rabbit a day before the net to 3 rabbit tails a day now. Who told you to get fat? This getting fat, you should understand it as the alienation caused by the societal division of labor. That is, the predicament where an individual cannot survive without others. From hunter-gatherer societies to modern commodity societies, the logic is the same. As long as Bear One's need for me exceeds my need for Bear One, wealth will continuously tilt towards me. My exploitation of Bear One will only stop when what he gets is just enough to maintain his bare minimum survival, and he won't even get 1 extra rabbit tail. Exploitation also exists in agricultural societies, and the process of exploitation also only stops when what the farmers get is just enough to feed themselves. But there's an important difference here. You should note that whether it's Bear One in hunter-gatherer society or Bear One in modern commercial society, he is voluntary. That is to say, he has an exit mechanism. It's just that because he is too fat, that is, alienated by the societal division of labor, he doesn't have the ability to exit. However, in traditional agricultural societies, because Bear One cannot move and stores food at home, he has to outsource defense to professional violent organizations, namely kings and nobles. Then this violent organization, in turn, exerts violent coercion on Bear One, and Bear One has no exit mechanism. Ancient Rome, from republic to oligarchy. In situations where exit is impossible, inequality in agricultural societies will reach its limit in a very short period. In this regard, Scheidl cites the example of ancient Rome. Ancient Rome is described as a proprietary empire that created wealth entirely through land acquisition. Its rules of the game were very simple and straightforward. Conquer a place, set up a province, and then send a governor to collect taxes. So, after winning a battle, there are 2 sources of income. The first is spoils of war. How are spoils of war distributed? Well, how much is handed over to the public? How much is distributed to soldiers? And how much is kept for oneself and cronies is all up to the general. But who appoints the generals? The Senate. Then, who appoints the governors of the provinces? Still the Senate. For example, the Senate sent Pompey to the east as governor, requiring him to remit 100 million sesterces in taxes to Rome each year. This is the official arrangement. Once the official arrangement is set, the behind-the-scenes deals begin. 20 senators in the Senate pooled funds to form a consortium and approached Pompey, saying, "We'll give you $120 million, and you contract the tax collection rights in the East to us." Pompey hadn't even left Rome yet, and $20 million was already in his pocket. Of course he was happy. The consortium then sent a group of tax farmers, following Pompey's army to the east to collect taxes. If the provinces couldn't pay the taxes, the tax farmers would also lend them money. What was the annual interest rate? 48%. But what was the borrowing rate in Rome? Only 6%. See how ruthless the tax farmers were. Under such rules, the obvious result is that the state becomes poor while the generals become rich. Senators would say, "Oh dear, taxes are too heavy and the people below are going to revolt. Let's not collect 100 million. Let's collect 50 million. That's what they said, but the taxes from the provinces were not reduced by a single sesterce. The 50 million that the Roman Republic reduced in collection went into the pockets of the consortiums. In this way, senators and generals rapidly became wealthy. So, how many senators were involved in this scheme? According to Scheidel's estimate, more than half. What about the commoners? In the beginning, commoners would sow wheat seedlings in the spring, put down their hoes to go to war, and still be able to rush home in the autumn to harvest the wheat. Later, as the territory grew larger and larger and the Mediterranean became a Roman lake, soldiers were further and further away from home, and a campaign could last for several years. As a result, the land was left uncultivated. Senators left in Rome took the opportunity to buy land at low prices. When soldiers returned from the battlefield, they found their land was gone. Conflicts became acute. From Marius and Sulla to later Caesar, they all relied on promises of land to soldiers to gain the loyalty of the army and wage war against the Senate. Generals had troops in hand, and senators were in a miserable state, either dying or fleeing, their properties confiscated by the generals and redistributed. This drama was repeatedly staged. In the end, whenever there was news that a certain army had won a battle and was returning to Rome soon, the senators in Rome would tremble. How could this republic continue? Although from time to time, generals came forward to fight for the redistribution of land for soldiers, the situation where soldiers returned from battle only to find their land bought up by senators could not be resolved. Because you only had a wife and children at home, while senators had slaves in abundance. You couldn't compete with them. That's one reason. Secondly, Rome at that time already had a population of over 1 million, requiring a lot of land to grow food. Thus, you couldn't solve the transportation costs. According to estimates, for every 80 miles of land transport, the price of grain to Rome would double. Therefore, grain mainly had to be shipped from the east. If the land you were allocated was 40 miles away from Rome, the cost of transporting your grain to Rome would increase by 50%. Then you would definitely lose money the more you farmed. Therefore, although there was constant unrest and land redistribution, soldiers could not keep their land. In Italy alone, more than 1 million people became slaves because they couldn't repay their debts. The rest simply sold their land and moved to the slums of Rome to become unemployed vagrants. In Cicero's time, walking out of Rome, in any direction within a day's journey, the Italian countryside only had senators, slaves working, and hardly any commoner farmers could be seen. The situation had deteriorated to this extent. In the late Republic, the wealthiest senators had assets that were 1.5 million times the average annual income of a Roman Republic citizen, but they were still insatiable. How greedy were the Roman senators? Scheidel gives an example. In 214 BC, Hannibal invaded Italy, and the Roman Republic was at a critical juncture of life and death. The Senate ordered Roman citizens to hand over their slaves to serve as rowers in the navy. Families with assets of 50,000 Roman currency provided 1 slave, those with 100,000 provided 3, and those with over 1 million provided 8. So, how many did the senators with tens of millions in assets provide? They didn't provide a single one. According to Scheidel's calculations, in the mid-2nd century AD, inequality in the Roman Empire reached its peak. In this period, the Roman Empire had a population of 70 million and an annual GDP close to 50 million tons of wheat equivalent. Converted to $1990 US purchasing power, The per capita GDP was $800. What about the wealth distribution? The top 1.5% of families own 1/6 to 1/3 of the total output. These figures may still be greatly underestimated. Therefore, the level of wealth inequality in the 2nd century Roman Empire was likely to exceed that of today. What is the extent of global wealth inequality today? In a world of 7 billion people, the assets of the richest 62 people are equal to the total assets of the poorer half, 3.5 billion people. The aristocratic senators, who monopolized most of political power, rapidly degenerated the Roman Republic into an oligarchy after finding ways to turn political power into personal wealth. The sign of this degeneration into oligarchy was the first triumvirate formed by Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar in 60 BC. From this point on, although the Roman Republic had a few brief resurgences, it was already a republic in name only. Aristotle praised the republican system of government during his lifetime. If he could crawl out of his coffin and see such an end to the Roman Republic, one wonders what his sighs and laments would be. Ancient Greece, the intensification of inequality. That was the situation in ancient Rome. Scheidel also compared ancient Rome and ancient Greece. As everyone knows, the systems of ancient Greece and ancient Rome were very different. So, was there also a situation of increasing inequality? Let's continue. When Roman oligarchs encountered problems, they vigorously squeezed the middle class. Just like mentioned earlier, during the Second Punic War, they forced wealthy families to provide slaves to row in the navy. Athens, on the other hand, was a democracy, and when faced with problems, they would eat the big households, tax the wealthy heavily. How did they eat the big households? For example, when the navy needed to build a new warship, or it was the birthday of Athena, the patron goddess of Athens. When such major events occurred, the 1,200 richest people in the city-state were required to make sacrifices on behalf of the city-state. How much to sacrifice? About 3 years' total income for an average 5-person family. However, the annual income of the rich was only about 12 times that of an average 5-person family. In other words, the rich were additionally subjected to a 25% property tax. The system of eating the big households certainly slowed down the degree of inequality. According to Scheidel's calculations, the exploitation rate of the elite class in ancient Rome against the lower classes was as high as 77%, while in Athens it was only 49%. This was quite mild. As long as a society is allowed to develop peacefully, wealth distribution inequality will naturally arise and intensify. In this regard, Sparta provides the most vivid example. Sparta forbade citizens from farming, let alone engaging in trade. They used iron as currency and deliberately added vinegar during quenching to make the iron coins very brittle. This way, no one was willing to do business with them. In 480 BC, land was evenly divided into 8,000 plots, one for each citizen, cultivated by the conquered Argives, known as helots for citizens. Spartan men lived in military camps, focusing wholeheartedly on being warriors. This is probably the simplest and most direct version of a violent machine enslaving and exploiting farmers in human history. The economic obligation of Spartan warriors was limited to regularly handing in their share rations to the military mess hall. The quality of the rations must have been very poor, because a merchant once ate a meal in a Spartan public dining hall. Just after taking a sip of lentil soup, he exclaimed loudly, "Now I understand why Spartans are not afraid to die in battle." Even with such painstaking institutional designs, inequality still arose in Sparta. More than 200 years later, the number of Spartan citizens dropped to 700. The vast majority of Spartan men were deprived of citizenship simply because they were too poor to even pay for their share in the mess hall. But this set of institutional designs in Sparta, forbidding citizens from farming and doing business, deliberately using iron as currency, eating in public mess halls, citizens calling each other equals, it impressed Plato. In his Republic, he specifically designed a role for Spartans, called guardians, thinking they would be completely selfless. If Plato could crawl out of his coffin and see Sparta become like this, his Republic would probably have to be rewritten. Okay, today we analyze examples of ancient Rome and ancient Greece. The conclusion is obvious. In these societies, as long as they developed peacefully, their level of wealth inequality would definitely gradually increase. So, ancient Rome and ancient Greece rose around the same time. Why was it Rome that conquered Greece and not Greece that conquered Rome? Let's see you in the next episode.